My name is Hunter Holtzapfel, host of Beyond the Reservoir, and I'm excited to share with you the people and technology that make up the Reservoir Performance team here at SLB. My hope is that you leave this episode having learned more about the guest and what they do in the energy industry and their career along the way. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Yara Alawami, who's just starting her new role as PSD manager in Qatar. Yara, thank you for joining and welcome.
Hello. Hi, Hunter. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I think the last time I saw you was in ATCE at the trade show last year here in Houston.
Yes.
And since then, you've made a couple moves and you're about to make another move. Can you tell us a little bit about where you've been the last year or so and where you're going?
Of course. So since I saw you, that was my first time in Houston since I moved out of Houston. When I started with SLB. And then when I moved back to Saudi, I joined the unconventional resources team. And when I saw you, I was switching from CEC to a lean stim champion for the unconventional resources contract that we have with Saudi Aramco. After that, January came up and I got a really exciting opportunity. I went to our headquarter office in Paris for a short-term assignment. So if anyone is familiar with RP100, it's the Reservoir yearly summit. So I took care of planning that the first half of the year. And then now entering the second half of the year, I'm moving to Qatar for PSD manager.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's from what I saw, looked like a wonderful event. And, you know, that's quite a bit of movement in 1 year's time. So awesome.
Yeah.
I guess to start, maybe you can share a little bit about not just the last year of your career, but your full career so far, and maybe your background, you know, from when you were little to college to now.
Yes, of course I can. So I was born and raised in my home country, Saudi Arabia. When I was 18, I moved to Pennsylvania to pursue my bachelor degree in energy engineering. I was at Penn State. When I graduated, I decided to completely switch up and join SLB. Back then it was Schlumberger in OneStim as a hydraulic fracturing field engineer. I spent 3 years and a half almost in the field. And after that, I moved back to my home country, Saudi Arabia. That's when the Saudi team was working on bidding for the unconventional resources contract for Saudi Aramco. So I joined them right when we started. I was working directly from the client's office for almost all my 2 years that I spent in Saudi. And at my 2-year mark, exactly the day I landed in Saudi back from the States, 2 years later is the day I flew out to go to Paris for my short-term assignment. Then, yeah, it's crazy. And then now I'm moving to Qatar.
Very cool. So how long you've been with the company? How long now?
So I've been a little bit over 5 years.
Okay.
So I started in May of 2018. Yes.
Yeah. So that's quite a bit of movement and some good positions along the way. That's awesome. I want to touch on the fact that you're from Saudi and you're in engineering, or you moved to the States for engineering. I mean, there's a lot of big jumps in your life, and a lot of big risks, maybe as a better way to say it. Can you touch on some of those big jumps, big changes? Can you touch on like how you've navigated those changes, those risks, those kind of opportunities in your life and in your career?
So I would say the first thing is I'm a big risk taker. I don't like to take no for an answer. So these are two things that drive me to taking risks in what I've become today. From a young age, being a Saudi female, I was looking up to a few people. One of them was my aunt, Amal, who was one of the first petroleum engineers that worked in Saudi Aramco. And she had a great reputation. She was doing great. And then after Saudi Aramco, she left and she moved to Vienna with her whole family and worked at OPEC. I've always looked up to her since I was young. And I've always said, this is the kind of successful woman I want to become one day. So she was a natural drive in my career that she didn't realize the kind of influence she had on me, but she had a huge influence. So So I knew from a young age I want to be an engineer. And then when I was in ninth grade, Saudi Aramco was building their first building that was going to have solar panels installed on and all of that. And I felt like I want to get into renewable energy. So from my younger
Mhm.
age, I said, okay, I want renewable energy. I want to get into that kind of world. So that's how I decided to go for energy engineering. And Penn State offered a program. At that time, it was one of the few programs that only focused on renewable energy. So I knew this was what I wanted to be. But at the same time, I always wanted to become what my aunt was, like an influencer for the younger generation, for the Saudi females, to be an advocate, especially in the STEM area, because at that point it was still a challenge for females to grow as much compared to now. So that was my main drive in getting into engineering and getting into the risks and ending in the field rather than renewable was something super simple. One of my friends was a field engineer in SLB back then, Schlumberger, and he visited Penn State once and I was like, how is it? Do you enjoy it? And he said, yeah, honestly, it's just like all hands on, nothing that you would enjoy, like it doesn't suit you. And I just took that as why? Like, why wouldn't it suit me as like a girl, or what's the reason?
Yeah.
And I did not get the answer. So when I got my offer, I literally had two offers in front of me. It's either I go for a field engineer or I go for a solar panel coordinator. So it's either I go for my comfort zone or my not so comfort zone. And I
Yeah.
decided to take the risk. And I was like, okay, you know what? I need to prove people wrong.
Yeah.
So
And it paid
I
off
went,
for sure.
and it definitely paid off. And I think his words throughout the years, like I always remember it, and I'm always like, see, even anyone can do it. So I think these are the kind of drives that took me.
Yeah, no,
to
that's awesome. It's good to hear. I mean, there's a couple things there. One, role models. I mean, that's big. I think it's
Yeah.
important to have a role model or a mentor or both. And then taking the risks. It's easy to stay in our comfort zone. It's easy to not try to improve or take that risk. But when you do, it can be scary, but it ultimately pays off. I mean, that's a pretty big move too from Saudi. I don't know if you've ever been to Penn State before, or if you just kind of blindly took the leap, but I imagine it was pretty different for you, especially Pennsylvania. I've been there a few times. It's quite a bit different than I imagine Saudi is.
Yep, 100%. It was my first time in Pennsylvania ever. I visited the States before that, but Penn State specifically, it was my first time. My sister, my eldest sister, who's also a big role model for me, was in Washington, D.C., and she was studying there. So I visited her my senior year in high school, but I had no idea that Penn State was completely different than what DC looks like.
Yeah.
But it was nice. Like, I think something about Penn State is if you're a social person and you like to meet people and you like to interact and you like to plan, it becomes such a great experience. And that's what happened to me. But I think like that's what happened. What helped is, I think, my social butterfly aspect.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a good quality to be able to have because it's a big change and pretty far away from home. So awesome. I appreciate you elaborating on kind of that risk taking, and that it generally pays off. And if it doesn't, it's probably not that big of a deal. We make things much more big of a deal in our minds, I think. So you've done a lot in 5 years or about 5 years at the company. To some, they would say that's success. I don't know if that is the case for you. I'm sure it is, but in your own words, or how do you measure your own success, and what is success to you?
What is success to me, I think, is setting long-term goals, like short-term goals for long-term goals and reaching them. I think to me, I've done a lot of success within 5 years, but I did it because of like passion and motivation. And I've always wanted to become better. I'm a person who like to compete with myself. Like I always compare myself to the year before and I'm like, oh, you were good at that, but you need to be better in this and you need to be better in that. So it's always that continuous self-competition. And my success is always personally, and it might sound weird, but if I wake up and I'm excited to go to work and I go to sleep and I feel like I achieved something at work today, whether it's for me, for my management, for even someone outside, then that's success. And day by day, this becomes a big success. Like a daily job, you look back at it 1 year and you're like, wow, I've done all of this, but you don't realize it day to day until later on.
Yeah, that's big. I mean, I see that in my own work. It's, you kind of get lost in the weeds sometimes. And then you look back and like, oh wow, we've actually done a lot. But I like that definition of success and comparing yourself to yourself and not someone else. I think a lot of us, or a lot of people in general, can get caught up comparing to someone else or another thing, and that can be a little bit more destructive. So I really like that. Thanks for sharing about your definition of success. I think it's clear you've been successful, at least from what I see. And I'm excited to see kind of how your career continues to be successful. Changing gears, pun intended, I guess. You have before we were talking about some of your passions, and you mentioned F1. F1 is very exciting. I don't know if you've seen the show Drive to Survive, but it's taken the, I think, US F1 by a storm. Can you share a little bit more about F1? Like, one, your passion in it, and two, how you kind of use that as a parallel to work and management, and how you'll use it in your future management position.
Of course. So I love F1. Like, I'm obsessed with F1, but not just the races, like the behind the scenes, the way it works, the logistics, everything. And the crazy part is, what gets me more into F1 and what gets me more interested in it is, the more you read about it, the more you relate it to our work, especially like when I was in unconventional resources and the way we were working day to day. Sometimes I felt like I was in an F1 race. Like, oh, we're going to achieve 10 stages. Okay, how do we get to the end line? But you have this budget cap and you have this many operations, and something might break and you have to spend money on it, and you have your maintenance and everything. So it's literally the same. What got me into F1 was a friend of mine who is really into sports. It wasn't Drive to Survive. And then later I watched Drive to Survive. But when I first started watching it, I was trying to watch, like, being a natural engineer, I was trying to watch a lot of the technical interviews of how they build these cars and these small things that help with the aerodynamics. And it's a 1 centimeter change from race to race that makes that huge difference. And it makes Max Verstappen wins compared to other people. And then, so I started relating it a lot to work, honestly. Like, oh my God, if we want to do this, if we want to achieve more stages per day and all of that. And there was one thing that I think part of even lean in the world that they use a lot is the method of pit stops, and how pit stops in F1 evolved. A pit stop 40, 50 years ago, I think it was 1960, was half an hour. It was a 30-minute pit stop. Someone will literally take the wheel off, someone will put it back, and they might put more oil in the car. Like, there was a lot in that pit stop. And now a 3-second pit stop is a long pit stop. Like, I see, if the driver I like is like 3.2, I'm like, wow, what's happening? So because you see what happened, they have people working in parallel. They work at the same time. Someone does the same job in parallel at the same time. And they compare that a lot to demobs in fracking, if you're familiar. Like, when you demob from one location to another, we start the clock and we see how long it takes us to start the first stage on our next pad. That time spent is basically a pit stop. From your last stage to the first, it's literally a pit stop. So that's how I started implementing a lot of my lean stem methods, not just here, even when I was in the field in the US. A lot of it, I'm like, okay, we all need to have roles. We need to split roles before we start demobbing. Not everyone is like running around and all of that. So I honestly did take a lot from the pit stop changes into SLB. A lot of it I'm looking forward to take in my next role, which is the operational and managerial side of F1. Like Red Bull, for example, per se, they have around 70 to 100 employees that travel with them race to race. And then they have another that are working in the factory. And during a race, everyone is all hands on. If something is happening, it's either the engineer or the mechanic. Someone with that role is getting involved. But
Yeah.
there's one big person, Christian Horner, on the top, and Helmut Marko, and the executive team that are basically leading this. So it's not they're leading the success because of their leadership skills, but then you have the engineers, you have the mechanics, you have the people that work in their financial team. Everyone is working hand in hand for Max 2 in the championship. So I think from an SLB perspective, that's what our managers are. Like, they lead, and everyone else is working as a team to help getting to that end line, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's an awesome parallel. I mean, I like the analogy for sure, and I think it is one that other people have used in some way or the other. I mean, it's amazing how similar it is to work in general. There's actually you mentioned the small little changes here and there. There's a book by the chief technical officer, whatever his position is at Red Bull, Adrian Newey. How to build a race car, something like along those lines. It's a really good book. I apologize for not knowing the name offhand, but I would recommend that one to anyone, whether or not they're a F1 fan or not. It's a good book. Do you have a favorite team or driver?
So I'm a Red Bull or supporter, I would say. I love Red Bull. I love Max Verstappen. The way he drives, the confidence he has, his skills. Like, he grew so much throughout the years. But in general, like, I'm a Red Bull supporter.
Yeah.
So whether it's Checo or Max crossing the line.
Yeah, well, you've probably been happy a lot this year. I've seen them really doing well.
For one race.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. I heard a podcast with the CEO of Ford that Ford and Red Bull are partnering up, and actually they intend to use. I don't know if this is serious or not, but the Adrian's ability for aerodynamics on some of their passenger cars. So there's a lot that F1 brings, not just for the spectator sport, but in our passenger vehicles and parallels to business as well. Coming off F1, I again, I've seen through what you've said so far, you're a risk taker, you're agile, you're resilient, you're successful. Would you say that you were kind of born with those skills, or did you have to hone them? How did you find them in yourself? Because for many of us, it's probably not natural. Maybe one or two of those things, but I imagine you don't just wake up and have success. You have to work on it. Can you share on that?
Yes, I think a huge part of this was my school. The school I went to in Saudi, Dhahran Ahliya schools, I think it built the basis of who I am, or kind of made me find out that these are the things that interest me, and this is what it takes for me to become successful. One of the things is even the challenges I faced in school. I was a person, let's say, maybe it's easier if I put it in a story, but our school, every year, the seniors will have a graduation. But our school used to do it, or still does it, with some sort of a twist. So they'll put a theme to each graduation, and the students, there will be like a student committee from the senior class that basically leads and works on this graduation, and some students from the 11th and 10th grade, chosen very specific students. And what they work on is they design a whole background drop for the graduation ceremony based on the theme. And there will also be some performances, some dances, but they're all created by, choreographed by these students. So everything was done by the students. Nothing was done by calling someone, hey, we need you to, like a third party or something. So you'd see a lot of talent coming out at a young age. And that's how I found in me that these are the things that I enjoy, because starting 9th grade, I wanted to become one of those students. And I went up to my art teacher and I told her, I will stay after school and I will paint with you. And she was kind of like, I remember her face when I told her that. So she was like, okay, you want it. Okay, stay after school. She wasn't like, no, I'll find a free class and I'll take you. She's like, okay, fine, stay after school. I did stay. I didn't mind it. But then that was the door that opened for me the opportunity where in 10th grade, 11th grade, I was part of those teams. And when it came to my graduation, I was part of the leading team to plan our graduation from A to Z, to plan the senior trip for my friends, to plan the design of the senior jackets and all of that. And it was something simple like this, where myself and even my friends noticed that kind of side in me. And that's what helped me. Because then when I went to Penn State, I started planning events for the Penn State community. And yeah, little did I know, one event after the other, they became known and people were coming up to me. And at some point, I was going to start like my own company on the side, but then I joined SLB and it was fun. So I would say
it's interesting.
I figured it out.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's, again, like a small thing or just it happens to be, the right place, the right time, but it really kind of exponentially, sets you on the right path. I recently had an episode with Peter Schlicht, and he had this, very similar trajectory, or I shouldn't say trajectory, but similar moment that, someone said one thing to him and that changed his life. It's pretty interesting. But I think it's worth noting we have to be cognizant that these opportunities or moments happen because.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, no, that's, I as I told you earlier, my child did not really want to go to school this morning, and we had to have a little bit of a late start. So this is a good opportunity, I think, to say, not everything in life is successful. I mean, your career looks very successful. It is successful, but I'm sure there've been some ups and downs, some challenges along the way. Can you share, maybe not the specifics of the challenges, but unless you want to, but maybe how you've navigated those or turned those challenges into success or life lessons to create success? Because I don't think it's appropriate for anyone to say, yeah, everything in life is successful, everything I touch is gold. I mean, I know even Elon Musk's of the world have their own challenges.
Of course. I did have a lot of challenges throughout my career, personal and external challenges. And I would say I did turn them around. But one thing I learned in life or in my career, and even before I joined Schlumberger or SLB, is not positivity, but not like, oh, everything is butterflies and everything is great and being positive. No, there is a sign behind everything. So whenever something happens, there's a reason behind it. If it's bad, there's a lesson behind it. If it's good, there's still something behind it. So I took all the challenges as, okay, I should go through this challenge in order to be successful. I should go through this hardship to learn something about me. So this was something that really helped me throughout my challenges. A few of the challenges I had is when I first joined SLB, I joined having literally zero knowledge in petroleum engineering. I took zero classes. I didn't know the difference between a well and a reservoir. It was that bad. So I joined, and the first class you have like BOS, and everyone around me was a petroleum engineer, and everyone in the introductory class, everyone knew what the professor or teacher was talking about, what the instructor was talking about. And for me, I'm like, I have no idea what they're saying. Yeah. And I remember for a good 2 weeks, I was going back to the apartments that they had put us in Tulsa, and everyone would go and enjoy their time. And I felt just overwhelmed. Like, I can't be like them. I can't learn all of this. Like, and I was just every day studying, every day, like opening material from one thing to the other, blah, blah, blah. That was a big challenge. Like, I was crying every day. I felt like I'm going to quit. I'm not going to survive this. But that did play a huge role for me in the company, because I took it as a challenge on myself. It's I need to learn. And if I don't learn, I'm not going to be successful. And then, of course, going to the field, being an engineer, and then the only female on my shift, and everyone around me, like the operators and the supervisor that I worked with have been in the field for years. So it's like, who is this that's coming? At that time, I didn't have a mentor. So I didn't have a mentor at that time. So it was a bit of a challenge. And I did have a few breakdowns in the field. But 2 years later, my supervisor and my operators became my family. So
Yeah.
it was a hard start, but definitely a great ending. I'm still in touch with them. And then, of course, even moving back to Saudi, like I was out of the field from wearing coveralls every day and working on like operations and just pumping stages to going to a client's office, and it's Saudi Aramco. So I'm like, okay, so I haven't been back in my country for 8 years, and now I'm going to work in the client's office, Saudi Aramco, straight from the field. So how does everyone talk? How do I deal with things? So that was also another challenge. But that one, thankfully, I did have a mentor from SLB that I literally went up to, and I'm like, listen, like, I'm going to come to you for help. I wasn't afraid, and helped me a lot. There were a lot of challenges, even like personally, when I was at my lowest and throughout my career. I think everyone has to go through that point where they see themselves at their lowest. But if you know WISE, the mentorship program for females, that helped me so much, because I joined it when I was at my lowest. And I remember my first session, someone said, and I wrote it down, I don't remember it exactly, but it was in the words of like, the way you deal with yourself at your lowest is what's going to show you like who you are at your strongest. And like, you shouldn't be quitting on yourself when you're at the lowest of your career or your personal life, mentally, and all of that. So WISE helped me so much. You see other people, it's not just females and males that have similar challenges to you or have been through similar challenges to you. So it helped me a lot to like navigate my career.
Yeah, that's big. I mean, I think you said it a few times. I mean, the challenges they shape kind of how we navigate the challenges, shape our future success, and that's tremendous. And I like that you said or brought up the I think you said WISE, right? It's good to be able to find those groups. And you also mentioned something that I think is a very real and worthwhile thing to bring up again, is the fact that you're a woman in an industry that's predominantly men, and that can be scary and challenging and hard. What's something that you tell a young female looking at, we'll just say STEM in general, who maybe scared or doesn't know? I mean, can you say it's worth the risk? Take the risk, take it, do it. What would you tell that young person?
100% worth the risk. 100% worth the risk. It's it's a nice feeling when you're going against the norm. Because it's still not wrong, but you're going against the norm. And when you go against it, it's a nice feeling. It's like surfing through a big wave.
Yeah.
It's like you get a nice feeling afterwards. What I would say to a young person going into STEM is don't be afraid. It's all on you though. This is something they told us the first week in SLB and OFS is your career and your growth in this company is all on you. If you put the effort, it's where it will show. It's not like a place where you work and it doesn't show. Honestly, this is a place where when you work, you will be appreciated, and you're appreciated and you're investing in yourself. And honestly, the STEM sector is a sector for self-investment, for even having an influence in your company, in your country, in the world. Like, it's such a great challenge, and it's very, very rewarding. And as scary as it looks from the outside, it's actually fun.
Yeah, for sure.
I enjoy it. It's not scary.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think for some, I think, it's natural career. I mean, for myself, obviously I'm not a young female, but for myself, I was kind of knew I wanted to be in engineering from a very young age, but I know others, they don't know. And it's worth exploring. And it's definitely a tremendous field and opportunity and industry. And it's exciting to see a lot of push for the younger females in general, including my daughter. I was telling Maciel, who I think you know, how we bought, she gets these little science experiment packs in the mail every month. And then mostly my wife does them with her during the day. So it's pretty cool to see that's happening, and that push and continues to grow in numbers. So awesome. I think you're a great advocate for that. And I hope to see you continue to advocate for women in STEM throughout your career. I guess, we're getting up on the half hour. So I guess one last question. What excites you most about SLB and the future of your career?
I think the future of SLB and where we're heading with the new brand and all of that. Mm-hmm. And my career is the influence I will have being part of SLB, but 20 years from today in my country. Yeah. I think the females in Saudi Arabia are find it like they're getting a lot of great opportunities now and having a great influence. And 20 years from today, I would want to look back and say, I was part of SLB making a change, or I would be making a change in my home country.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly, you're very successful. I appreciate you coming on to share your story, your journey, your future aspirations. And it's definitely exciting. And hopefully we can have you on again to share that success. But before you go, I like to end with some rapid fire questions of the guest. Are you okay with that?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So Yara, what's your favorite food?
French fries and sushi.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's an interesting combo. Do you eat them together or separate?
No, separate for sure. But I definitely enjoy fries on any meal. And then if I'm going for sushi, I'm the happiest person.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. How about coffee or tea? What would be your coffee order at a Starbucks or similar?
So I'm not a big coffee person, but I'm a mate person. So I got this from Argentinian people. My instructor in Tulsa one time was Argentinian and got me into mate. So I have my mate cup and the mate leaves.
Oh, wow. I have some as well, but not that fancy. It's just in like a tea bag that I can soak in hot water. Maybe I'll have to step up my game.
It's great.
Yeah, I'll have to check out the cup and straw thing.
Yeah.
If you could go to beach vacation or mountain retreat, which one would you pick?
I love the water, so I'm gonna pick beach.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy one there, huh?
Yeah, I love the water, so beach.
Perfect. If you could meet any famous person, who would that be?
Beyonce.
Yeah.
I'm like the biggest fan of Beyonce. So.
Awesome. Sure. Well, hopefully someday you get that opportunity. And if you could recommend any book or podcast or similar to the audience, what would it be?
Book. Okay. So fun fact, I don't really read books, but I took it a challenge on myself this year. Mm-hmm. And I just started reading, and I finished my first book that I could have sworn I remembered the name an hour ago, but now it's Paulo, The Alchemist.
Okay, yeah.
So I always attempted reading books, and it never worked for me. I always get distracted. I don't really focus. And this year I said, I need to read a book. And everyone told me like The Alchemist, something you would enjoy. Because I like to get something. I like to learn something out of the book. I wanted to send me a message or something. And I kid you not, The Alchemist was the book. I was even around the beach and I pulled it out and I said, I want to read. Yeah. So it's very surprising of me. So I would say The Alchemist. And probably everyone read it, but I mean, if you didn't read it.
One, I like to read in general, but I often don't find enough time for it or make time for it. But one thing I've done, and maybe something you can try and listener can try, is trying Audible. So I like to go for walks in the morning and I just plop in Audible and you can listen to a book. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a good way to consume some reading, I guess. Well, Yara, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing more about you, and look forward to seeing you in the future and hearing more about your career as PSD manager and, of course, beyond.
Yay, thank you, Hunter. Thank you,
Yeah,
Joseph.
thank you.
Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Reservoir. Please tune in to all future episodes on your favorite podcast platform, and thank you for tuning in.